When life surprises us, it rarely asks for permission. It doesn't arrive neatly wrapped or come with a warning label. It simply happens often at the dinner table, sometimes in the middle of laughter, and sometimes, like in this story, when your husband casually says, "My ex is coming to Christmas dinner." In that instant, something inside us shifts. A quiet tension fills the air. Our hearts start whispering questions our minds aren't ready to answer. And in those moments, what defines us isn't the situation, it's how we choose to respond. Grace isn't something we're born with, it's something we practice. It's the calm breath when emotions rise, the gentle smile when discomfort visits, and the decision to lead with dignity when chaos could so easily take the lead. I remember reading about Eleanor Roosevelt, a woman who faced criticism, scrutiny, and betrayal on the public stage. She once said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." What she understood was that grace is not weakness, it is the discipline of the heart. It's the power to remain yourself when the world tests your patience, your peace, and your pride. When I think of moments like that dinner, when everything inside you wants to react, when your pride wants to speak louder than your wisdom, I think of how grace becomes a quiet revolution. Because grace doesn't mean you accept disrespect, it means you rise above it with self-respect. Grace doesn't mean silence, it means choosing the right words at the right time for the right reason. When Rosa Parks sat on that bus in 1955, she wasn't loud, she wasn't forceful, she was graceful. Her quiet defiance changed a nation. That is what grace looks like in motion, firm, steady, and unshaken. It's easy to show grace when everyone around you behaves well. But real grace, the kind that shapes leaders, heals families, and inspires generations, is born in the moments when emotions test our values. Think about the holidays themselves, moments that are supposed to be filled with warmth and connection. Yet often, they become the stage for old wounds, hidden insecurities, and silent comparisons. What if, instead of defending ourselves, we paused and listened? What if we looked at others not as reminders of our pain, but as reflections of our growth? History reminds us that progress always starts with composure. When Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of nonviolence, he wasn't only talking about politics or protest. He was speaking about the soul. He was teaching us that you can meet confrontation with compassion and still be powerful. He knew that a calm heart is not an idle one, it is a wise one. And wisdom, in its quiet way, changes the course of history. There's something deeply human about being caught off guard, about feeling vulnerable, even threatened. But growth doesn't happen in comfort. It happens in those moments when you sit across from discomfort and decide to treat it with grace. Maybe that dinner wasn't about the ex at all. Maybe it was about learning what kind of woman you've become. The woman who doesn't need to prove her worth because she already knows it. The woman who doesn't let another's presence disturb her peace, because her peace was never theirs to take. When you choose grace, you choose freedom. You stop letting emotions dictate your dignity. You begin to see that every test of your patience is an opportunity to practice strength with softness. And in that choice, you echo the wisdom of generations before us, those who endured storms with calm hearts and built bridges when others built walls. So the next time life sits an unexpected guest at your table, literal or emotional, take a deep breath. Remember that you are the keeper of your peace, the author of your response, and the guardian of your grace. Because the voices of history remind us that grace, not reaction, is what truly endures. And as we gather around the table of life, with its laughter, its pain, and its surprises, let us remember this. Grace doesn't change others first, it transforms us. And that transformation, that quiet strength, is what keeps the spirit of timeless voices alive in every one of us. There are moments in life when we are asked, without warning, to decide who we want to be, not in front of a crowd, not under a spotlight, but in the quiet space between our ego and our dignity. When your husband tells you that his ex is joining your Christmas dinner, it's not just a situation, it's a mirror. It reflects how deeply you understand your own worth. It tests not your love, but your composure. And in that moment, ego will whisper loudly. It will tell you to react, to make a point, to reclaim control. But dignity, that quieter voice inside, invites you to pause, to breathe, and to lead with grace. The truth is, the strength of our character is not revealed in comfort, it is revealed in conflict. Abraham Lincoln once said, Nearly all men can stand adversity, but if you want to test a man's character, give him power. Power does not always look like leadership or authority. Sometimes, power looks like emotional restraint. Sometimes, it's the choice not to say the first thing that comes to your mind, but the wisest thing that honors your values. Throughout history, the people who have shaped humanity most profoundly are not those who shouted the loudest, but those who held their dignity when others lost theirs. Think of Nelson Mandela, imprisoned for 27 years, yet walking out without bitterness. He understood something profound, that anger may feel powerful in the moment, but only dignity can sustain peace. And that same truth lives within our homes, our relationships, and even our most uncomfortable dinners. In that moment of tension, when you feel pride rising, when your instinct says to defend yourself, remember that dignity does not shrink in the face of discomfort. It expands. Dignity allows you to stay centered even when someone else's actions try to pull you off balance. It allows you to respond to discomfort without losing your peace. Our ego tells us that to be respected, we must be loud, we must dominate, we must prove. But dignity teaches us that respect is not something you demand, it's something you embody. It's found in how you sit in silence when others expect you to explode. It's found in how you choose kindness when you could choose chaos. There's a story about Jackie Kennedy that I've always loved. After her husband's death, when the entire world was watching her every move, she carried herself with quiet composure and strength. She didn't let her pain define her, she let her dignity speak for her. That moment, her calm in the storm, became one of the most powerful displays of leadership in modern history, because leadership begins with self-mastery. We may not all walk through the White House or lead a nation, but we all lead our homes, our children, our relationships, our communities. Every day. Life presents moments that test whether we'll act from ego or from integrity. When you sit at that table, you're not just managing a social moment, you're shaping your personal legacy. How you handle discomfort teaches those around you what strength looks like. And here's what makes this so human. Choosing dignity doesn't mean you don't feel hurt or confused or even angry. It just means you refuse to let those feelings define your actions. You acknowledge them, you breathe through them, and then you rise above them. That's where growth happens, not in denial, but in discipline. History gives us countless examples of this lesson. When Harriet Tubman led people to freedom, she faced betrayal, exhaustion, fear. But she didn't let those emotions derail her purpose. Her courage was not loud or ego-driven. It was sacred, purposeful, and rooted in dignity. She knew who she was and refused to let the world decide that for her. And that's what this moment teaches us, not just to survive discomfort, but to honor ourselves through it. To remember that no one else controls our energy or defines our worth. The way you choose to handle yourself when life tests your heart will always speak louder than any reaction could. So the next time you feel ego rising, that urge to defend, to control, to prove, remember that dignity is not weakness. It's wisdom. It's the bridge between who we are and who we're becoming. And when we choose it, we don't just bring peace to a moment, we bring purpose to our lives. Because the legacy of dignity, quiet, steady, unshaken, is one that never fades. It becomes a part of your voice, your story, your strength. And that voice, carried through generations, becomes another note in the everlasting harmony of timeless voices. Love is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength. We talk about it as if it's something soft, something that bends easily, something that belongs only in quiet rooms and gentle gestures. But if life teaches us anything, it's that love, real, selfless, grounded love, is one of the most powerful forces on earth. When your husband says his ex is coming to Christmas dinner, your heart might skip a beat, not because of jealousy alone, but because of what that moment represents. It's a test of love, not romantic love, but the kind of love that chooses peace over pride, understanding over reaction, grace over ego. It's the kind of love that doesn't flinch under discomfort, but stands tall in the storm. Love, when practiced as leadership, is not passive. It is deliberate. It is the decision to be bigger than your feelings, to see beyond the surface, and to hold space for something greater than yourself. I think about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who loved not only his people but the world enough to believe that hate could be transformed. His message wasn't just about justice, It was about the healing that only love could bring. He said, "I have decided to stick with love. Hate is too great a burden to bear." Those words carry the same truth today that they did decades ago. Because even in a home, even at a dinner table, love has the power to change everything when it leads the way. And let's be honest, loving in those hard moments takes courage. It takes emotional maturity to not just love when it's easy, but when it's uncomfortable. When we love as leaders, we learn to choose understanding over accusation. We learn to see others through the lens of compassion instead of comparison. Think about the women of history: Eleanor Roosevelt, Maya Angelou, Coretta Scott King, women who carried both heartbreak and hope in the same breath. They knew that love was not submission. It was the most revolutionary act they could offer in a world that often chose division. There's a strength that comes from holding your ground without hardening your heart. That's what love does. It softens you without weakening you. It allows you to show kindness even when your pride wants to speak first. When we lead with love, we lead by example. We show our children, our partners, and even ourselves that peace begins within. You can't build harmony in your home if chaos is ruling your heart. So imagine this dinner again. You could let tension set the tone, or you could let love take the seat at the head of the table. Maybe you choose to welcome, not because it's easy, but because it's right. Maybe you smile, not because everything feels perfect, but because you refuse to let discomfort write your story. In that moment, you're not just reacting, you're leading. You're showing that love can be gracious even when tested. This is what great leaders have always known. Love is not about being agreeable, it's about being intentional. It's about recognizing that every interaction, no matter how small, is a chance to lift others up or tear them down. And when we choose love, we elevate the moment. We take something awkward, something painful even, and we turn it into an opportunity for growth. Think about the words of Mother Teresa, who spent her life serving those who had nothing. She once said, "It's not how much we give, but how much love we put into giving." That truth applies to every act of kindness, every conversation, every table we sit around. Because love doesn't need grandeur, it needs sincerity. It's not about how perfect you look handling the situation, it's about how real you are in handling it with heart. When you choose to love, you take control of your story. You stop letting anger define your tone, and you start leading from a place of peace. And when you do that, you not only strengthen your relationships, you strengthen yourself. Love becomes your quiet revolution. It becomes your leadership. In a world that too often rewards sharpness, speed, and pride, choosing love is a radical act. It's a statement that says, "I will not be small just because the moment invites me to be." That's what every great leader of history understood, that love expands us. It gives us the wisdom to forgive, the courage to stand firm, and the grace to heal what might have broken otherwise. So when you find yourself sitting at that table, remember this. Love is not just an emotion, it's an act of leadership. It is the decision to bring peace where there could be tension, to bring compassion where there could be judgment, to bring light where there could be darkness. And in those small but powerful choices, you join the long, beautiful line of souls who have shaped humanity with heart. Because at the end of it all, when our stories fade into the echoes of history, it won't be our titles or our tempers that endure. It will be the love we led with. The love that healed instead of hurt, that reached out instead of pulled away, that taught others how to rise with grace. That is the voice that never dies. That is the heartbeat of timeless voices. There are moments in life when we are forced to face the quiet truth that the hardest person to understand, to forgive, and to lead is ourselves. When something unexpected happens, like your husband saying his ex is coming to Christmas dinner, your first instinct might not be grace or composure. It might be shock, confusion, maybe even a wave of insecurity. That's human. But as the emotions rise, there's another voice inside that gently asks, "Who do I want to be right now?" That voice is the beginning of self-reflection, the mirror of the soul that invites us to grow, to see not just the situation, but ourselves more clearly through it. Self-reflection is not about blame, it's about understanding. It's about holding a mirror to your reactions and asking, why does this moment make me feel the way it does? Because the truth is, the world will keep testing us. People will disappoint us. Situations will surprise us. But every challenge that stirs discomfort inside us also holds a message if we're still enough to hear it. The great philosophers of history, people like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and later leaders who practiced emotional mastery, understood that strength begins with knowing oneself. They taught that peace is not found in the absence of chaos, but in the ability to stay calm within it. Think about that. Calmness is not avoidance, it's understanding. It's realizing that how we respond to others often reveals how at peace we are with ourselves. When you sit across from someone who challenges your emotions, you're not just facing them, you're facing the parts of yourself that need healing. Maybe it's old wounds of comparison. Maybe it's a deep need to be seen, valued, or chosen. And when we allow ourselves to look at those emotions without judgment, we transform them into wisdom. That is what self-reflection does. It turns emotional noise into inner clarity. History gives us so many examples of this kind of quiet strength. Think of President Lincoln during the Civil War, burdened by a nation divided, carrying both grief and responsibility. He spent countless nights writing, reflecting, searching for understanding within himself before making decisions that would shape the world. He knew that leadership without reflection leads to reaction, and reaction, unexamined, leads to regret. We, too, are leaders of our homes, our hearts, our families. Every decision we make from a place of reflection rather than impulse becomes a moment of quiet leadership. When we choose to pause and ask ourselves, what does this moment teach me about me? That's when growth begins. Because wisdom doesn't come from being right, it comes from being real. Sometimes the mirror shows us things we don't want to see, our impatience, our pride, our insecurities. But that's not failure. That's the beginning of freedom. When you know your own patterns, when you recognize your triggers, your fears, your strengths, you stop being controlled by them. You begin to live intentionally, not reactively. And that's when you start shaping your peace instead of protecting your pride. Michelle Obama once said, "If you don't get out there and define yourself, you'll be quickly and inaccurately defined by others." Reflection helps us do exactly that. It allows us to define who we are, not by how others act, but by how we choose to respond. Because your peace is not dependent on who sits across from you at the dinner table. It's built by who sits within you every day. In this journey of self-reflection, you realize that growth doesn't always look graceful. Sometimes it looks like silence when you want to speak. Sometimes it looks like holding your ground while your emotions storm inside. But each moment you choose awareness over reaction, you reclaim a little more of your power. And that power isn't loud. It's steady. It's what every strong soul in history has discovered, the wisdom that comes from listening to yourself before you speak to the world. So when life surprises you, when discomfort knocks at your door disguised as an ex at Christmas, remember to look inward first. Ask yourself, what is this moment revealing in me? What can I learn here? Because every test, every tension, every quiet challenge is really a mirror held up to the soul, showing us where we can still grow, where we can still soften, where we can still lead. And when you face that reflection with honesty, something beautiful happens. You stop fearing the mirror. You start welcoming it, because you realize that knowing yourself is the greatest act of love, and mastering yourself is the greatest act of strength. In the end, the stories that live forever, the voices that echo through time, belong to those who chose to learn before they reacted, to reflect before they spoke, and to grow before they judged. That is the quiet, enduring power of timeless voices. There comes a time in every life when forgiveness is no longer about the other person. It becomes an act of liberation for ourselves. It's not easy. Forgiveness sounds noble when spoken about from a distance, but up close, it's raw, uncomfortable, and deeply human. It asks us to release our grip on the story we've told ourselves about how someone wronged us. It asks us to let go not because they deserve it, but because we deserve peace. Imagine this moment again. Your husband says his ex is coming to Christmas dinner. Maybe old memories stir, or insecurities rise quietly in your chest. You could let those emotions shape the evening. You could build a wall of cold silence and protect your pride. But then you pause and breathe. Because somewhere inside, you remember that forgiveness is not about erasing the past. It's about choosing not to live trapped by it. History has always shown us that forgiveness is one of the rarest and most powerful forms of strength. Think of Nelson Mandela, who after 27 years in prison, stepped into the sunlight not with vengeance, but with grace. When asked how he could forgive those who took so much from him, he said, "Resentment is like drinking poison and hoping it will kill your enemies." Mandela knew that holding on to bitterness doesn't punish the other person, it chains you to them. In our own lives, those chains may not be visible, but they're heavy all the same. They weigh on our joy, our presence, our ability to love fully. And often, the person we need to forgive most isn't even someone else, it's ourselves. We carry guilt for words said in anger, for choices made in fear, for times we stayed silent when we should have spoken. But forgiveness is the quiet declaration that we will no longer let yesterday's pain steal tomorrow's peace. In America's own story, we see how forgiveness has shaped our growth. After the Civil War, our nation faced a moment of deep division, families torn apart, neighbors turned enemies. Yet Abraham Lincoln, in his quiet wisdom, called for reconciliation instead of revenge. He spoke not as a politician, but as a man who understood that unity is born not from winning, but from healing. "With malice toward none, with charity for all," he said. Those words still echo, because they remind us that forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the highest form of courage. When we forgive, we aren't saying that what happened was right. We're simply choosing not to let it define us. Forgiveness doesn't rewrite history, it redeems it. It turns pain into perspective, anger into understanding, and wounds into wisdom. And in that transformation, we find ourselves becoming lighter, freer, stronger. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't always happen in one moment. Sometimes it's a process, a daily choice. You may forgive someone in your heart and still feel the ache of what happened. That's okay. Forgiveness isn't forgetting, it's choosing not to reopen the wound every time you remember it. It's a gentle act of self-respect that says, "I will not let pain be the author of my story." We've seen this spirit in the women and men who have led not through anger but through grace. Think of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who preached nonviolence in the face of unimaginable hatred. He once said, "Forgiveness is not an occasional act, it is a constant attitude." His strength didn't come from power, it came from love. A love that looked beyond offense, beyond fear, toward something greater, peace of heart. And maybe that's what this moment teaches us too. Sitting at that Christmas table, surrounded by emotions that could easily turn into conflict, forgiveness is the quiet choice that changes everything. It softens your tone, steadies your breath, and allows you to see humanity where pain once blinded you. Because in the end, what truly matters is not who was right, but who chose to rise. Each time we forgive, we honor the timeless truth that compassion is the most enduring legacy we can leave behind. Our ancestors, our leaders, our heroes, they remind us that healing the world begins with healing the heart. So if you ever find yourself holding on to bitterness, remember this. Forgiveness doesn't erase your story, it empowers it. It turns your scars into symbols of strength. And through it, you become part of something greater than yourself, a living echo of grace that carries forward through generations. Because in every age, across every challenge, the voices that truly last are not the ones that shouted the loudest or fought the hardest, but the ones that forgave when it mattered most. And that is the heart of timeless voices. There are moments in life when silence speaks louder than any argument, when grace becomes the answer to questions that anger can never resolve. Key point number 6 is about that sacred grace, the ability to stay grounded in dignity, even when tested by discomfort, pride, or jealousy. And perhaps, few moments test that grace more than sharing a table with someone who reminds us of insecurity, pain, or the fragility of love itself. Imagine sitting there, the dinner table set, the soft hum of laughter filling the air, the scent of food mingling with 1,000 unspoken emotions. The presence of an ex-lover at Christmas dinner might seem small in the grand story of a lifetime, but it becomes a test of the human spirit. It's in these ordinary moments that our character, not our comfort, is revealed. It's not about who they were or what they meant to your partner. It's about who you are and who you choose to be in that space. Grace is not about pretending the situation doesn't sting. It's not about smiling while your heart tightens. It's about choosing peace over pride. It's about knowing that your worth is not measured by someone else's past, but by the light you carry in the present. History teaches us that grace has always been the mark of the truly strong, those who stand tall not because they need to prove themselves, but because they already know who they are. Think about Eleanor Roosevelt. She once said, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." She lived through criticism, scandal, and scrutiny, yet she carried herself with quiet confidence. Grace was her armor. It allowed her to keep her head high in rooms where others tried to diminish her. Like Eleanor, we too can walk into any room with that same quiet dignity, knowing that composure is power and compassion is control. Grace is not passive. It is active restraint, a deliberate act of strength. It allows us to see beyond the surface, to rise above emotion, and to lead by example. It's the spirit that guided Rosa Parks as she sat calmly on that Montgomery bus, her stillness igniting a movement. Her grace didn't mean weakness. It meant mastery over fear. In the face of injustice, she remained unmoved, her silence louder than anger. And that grace changed history. In our personal lives, grace can change everything, too. When we extend grace in moments of tension, we invite peace into spaces that could otherwise erupt in chaos. We teach our children what leadership looks like. We show them that the most powerful person at the table is often the one who chooses calm over conflict. But grace isn't only something we show others, it's something we must show ourselves. Because there will be days when we fall short, when we react instead of reflect, when we let words slip that we wish we could take back. In those moments, self-grace becomes the path to healing. It's what allows us to keep growing instead of shrinking under guilt. History has shown us that every great leader, every person who's left a lasting mark, has done so through grace under pressure. Think of President Abraham Lincoln again. During one of the nation's darkest times, he led not through anger or vengeance, but through empathy. His words healed where wounds ran deep. He knew that grace could rebuild what war had torn apart. When we live with grace, we honor that same legacy. We stop trying to control how others behave, and instead, we master how we respond. We realize that the true test of character isn't how we treat those who love us, it's how we treat those who challenge us. It's about recognizing that no situation, no person, no memory from the past can take away your power unless you hand it over. Grace is what transforms tension into teaching, discomfort into discovery, and pain into purpose. It's what turns a Christmas dinner from a moment of insecurity into a story of strength. A story that reminds everyone at that table what real love looks like: calm, steady, unwavering. Because grace, in its truest form, is love wearing its most elegant attire. It's the voice that whispers, "I will not let this moment define me. I will define it." And when we choose grace, we join a lineage of souls who, across time and history, have chosen dignity over drama, peace over pride, and love over fear. These are the voices that echo through generations, the ones that remind us that real power lies not in winning the moment, but in mastering ourselves within it. And as we continue to live, to love, and to learn from history, may we carry that same quiet strength forward, the strength of grace. Because that, more than anything else, is what keeps the heart of humanity beating through every age. That is the voice of wisdom. That is the voice of love. That is the voice of timeless voices. Sometimes life surprises us in ways that reveal who we truly are, not in the grand moments when everyone's watching, but in the quiet, personal tests that come wrapped in discomfort. Key point number 7 is about transformation, how unexpected experiences can become mirrors, showing us the parts of ourselves we never knew existed. The story of a husband announcing that his ex is joining Christmas dinner might sound like the start of conflict or resentment. But in truth, moments like these can become invitations to evolve, to rise above ego, to rewrite our emotional stories, and to discover a strength that only grace under pressure can uncover. Transformation rarely arrives in a beautiful package. It often comes disguised as pain, confusion, or change. Yet history reminds us again and again that growth doesn't come from comfort. It comes from courage, from those who learned to stand steady when everything around them shifted. Think of Harriet Tubman. She was born into a world that told her she was powerless, but through her trials, through her unimaginable hardships, she transformed herself into a force of liberation. Each danger she faced became a lesson in faith. Each obstacle strengthened her resolve. Her journey wasn't about escaping. It was about transforming her fear into freedom, not just for herself, but for countless others. In our lives, Transformation might not look as grand, but it carries the same spirit. When we find ourselves in unexpected situations, moments that challenge our pride, our patience, or our perspective, we have two choices: resist or rise. Resistance keeps us stuck in bitterness, replaying old stories that serve no one. Rising, however, opens the door to growth, to a deeper understanding of who we are meant to become. Imagine sitting,